Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. He answers your Phillies questions all season long. It's the final edition of the mailbag here on the show. And a lot of Phillies fans now, Frank, are probably more interested in what's next, right?
Yeah, this is a key, very, very much more so than any other time in recent memory, a key offseason for the Phillies. And with this free agent class, we've been talking about it for years. This is the one to be excited about.
Right. We've been hearing about this since, 2012, that 19 was going to be the year, right?
Pretty much, yeah. As soon as they were all rookies, this was the offseason that they were going to hit free agency.
All right. Number one, Klentak spoke the other day of all the things that you can kind of take a comb through and say, this stood out, this stood out, this stood out. I mean, would you be critical? Would you say he did a good job? Would you say that, hey, I like what he had, his message? Because his message, he kind of tucked himself into an Eagles lost day, so I think his message kind of got swept under the rug a little bit.
Yeah, I think the message was kind of the message that we've had all along. I mean, I really think that the one criticism people have was, well, you were so far ahead. You were 15 games over 500. What happened? Is the collapse your fault? And I think he kind of basically admitted that the players that they had were just not good enough. And I think that's an honest assessment, so that when he goes to this offseason, he's going to be able to make moves. He's going to get into impact players. And you can't say that he didn't know that the roster was insufficient, because he's on the record saying the roster was insufficient.
I think, real quick, we talked about this at the start of the show. Is the pressure on Kapler or Klentak? Meaning, to me, Kapler got him to 80 wins. I don't care how they got there. I don't care that they collapsed and fell apart. He got him to 80 wins, which is more than most people thought. If they come back with the same type of roster, like they can't get any of these guys that we've been hearing about for years, the pressure's on Klentak now, right?
Absolutely, and then it will in turn become pressure on Kapler, because he's going to add the pieces, and then Kapler's going to be expected to win with them. So I think it's kind of both. Now, if Kapler gets the same roster and they just say, well, we think that the guys we have are going to bounce back, or they're going to improve upon their season in 2018, well, then it's all on Klentak. I don't think you can blame Kapler at that point. But if he goes out and gets some superstars like Bryce Harper or Manny Machado, Kapler's going to be expected to deliver. So it's going to be one right after the other.
But the pressure on Klentak right now comes with kind of a built-in, I don't want to say excuse, but almost taking away from the pressure, knowing that his owner, at least what we've heard, is willing to spend everything. So maybe that does add more pressure on Klentak, where if you know ahead of time, John Middleton has come out and said, hey, we're going to blank check whoever we can, and then we walk away with not Machado, not Harper, not a big name, then people are going to look around, to your point about if Gabe has the same roster, like, what the heck happened?
Yeah, talking to John Middleton in the spring training after the Arrieta signing, he was talking to a couple of us afterwards, and he said, look, I've got names circled. And he is. I totally believe him when he says he's ready to spend some money. So he's got to get them. I mean, if you get to the end of this off season and you can't successfully land them, then it's the real problem, because then what do you do? Then you have to be extra creative. You have to find ways to make creative trades. You have to find other ways to use your financial point of strength that a lot of other teams have. So I mean, this is critical top and down, because you can give them the checkbook. That's the biggest in all of baseball, but still at the end of the day, he's got to come up with the players.
Jeff, we have a mailbag question from Chris here.
He said Frank.
Oh my, I'm sorry. I was
still on emotion.
That's just such a bad job, man. Jeff. Yeah, that's just a bad job. All right, we got it from Chris here. I'm awake now. Klentak said one of the reasons for the Phillies' collapse is they didn't have the talent.
That's worse than McFarland last night on that Monday Night Football podcast.
Yeah, I was making fun of McFarland, and now he looks like a genius compared to me. So this is from Chris. Hello, Frank. Klentak said today one of the reasons for the Phillies' collapse is that they didn't have the talent. Well, isn't that a big part of his job description?
Well, yeah, that is his job description. But I think, though, looking at this upcoming free agent class that we've been talking about forever, and consider this too, right? So that he inherited this young talent from Ruben Amaro Jr.'s regime. And really, this was the first season that a lot of that talent really rose up to the major league. So you think of the Jorge Alfaros, the Nick Williams, the Roman Quinns. There's so many. We can keep going down the line. A lot of these players didn't even really sniff the major leagues until right about now. So they all had to rise to the major leagues. You had to see what you had with them. That was one thing that you had to do. And then meanwhile, I thought he did a good job acquiring the talent that's not going to hurt them long term, that's not going to hurt their financial strength. When you look at last year's free agent class, there was not a whole lot to choose from that would have really helped the Phillies in a meaningful way long term. And he added pieces like Carlos Santana, Jake Arrieta. They cost a lot of money in one sense, but in another sense, they really don't, because they are in no way handcuffed with what they're going to do down the line by signing those two guys. They're not handcuffed by the money they gave to the bullpen and Pat Neshek and Tommy Hunter. So really, his off-season last season was kind of a do-no-harm off-season, with the idea that the real talent is coming down the pike later. And in the meanwhile, you have to weed out the talent that might not be the top talent that they have in the system. And really, he had to see through the young players that were the prospects in the minor leagues and make sure that they had their opportunity to show whether or not they belong. And there's a lot of players we can kind of go down the list and say either they belong or they don't belong. And until you get to that point, it's really hard to start adding the types of free agents that were available last year, which were generally older, that might only give you another good season or two, or even the type that he signed. They're short-term deals. 3 years is not a long-term deal in baseball terms, and really they did no harm. And Arrieta and Santana, they certainly didn't have their best seasons, but they helped make the Phillies an 80-win team, which they would otherwise not have been. Without those two guys, they might not have won 70 again.
I have an interesting one here from Eric. Is it possible that the players were trying to get Kapler fired at the end of the year?
Jeez.
Okay, now there's a couple pieces of logic that will kind of argue against that. One, the players are trying to win, right? And we saw Rhys Hoskins go out and give everything he had. We saw Aaron Nola go out and give everything that he had, and they're the two superstars on the team, right? So are you going to say that all the players that aren't the superstars were going to lay down and die down the stretch? I don't think that's the case, because I don't think they would do that to their teammates, Rhys Hoskins and Aaron Nola. Besides that, all right, they would essentially be not just getting Kapler fired, but they would be getting themselves fired, because let's face it, some of these players did not perform in a meaningful way down the stretch, and that will be the reason why they are not coming back to the Phillies next year. So if they were going to try to get the manager fired, they probably would have to make sure first that even they would be sticking around. So, I realize there's a lot of hate for Kapler. A lot of people blame him for the collapse down the stretch. But as you said, Mike, 80 wins is still 80 wins, still a huge improvement from last year. And even though they kind of ran out of stamina down the stretch, which I think was the case for some of these young players who have never pitched that many innings, who have never played that many innings in the major leagues at once. And some just kind of got exposed as not being that talented. The rest of the league had figured out how to pitch to them, and the Odubles of the Herreras of the world just kind of fell off the charts. So I think all that kind of came together at the same time, but I don't think it's fair to say that anybody would try to lose on purpose. And if they do, they'd have no place in the major leagues.
All right, next mailbag question from Zach. How much does Jared Eichhoff's first and last start this year factor into the role he will have next season?
Well, it's a shame for Eichhoff, because he was kind of coming into the season as somebody that you kind of thought would bounce back off of a tough year. 2 years ago, he had a very nice season.
Can I just ask you a quick question on Eichhoff?
Sure.
Did they kind of hold him back because the other guys were pitching so well, or was he like this injury doesn't seem like it should have kept him out all season long?
I did get to talk to Eichhoff along the way. It just sounded like, without the sensation in your fingers and gripping the baseball, it seems like something that you really can't mess with. And I think they really struggled to figure out what the problem was. They looked at thoracic outlet syndrome as maybe one of the possibilities, and in the end, it wasn't, thankfully, because that could have been a tougher time. So I think in a lot of ways, they had people in the rotation, for one, that they didn't need to rush him, or they didn't feel the need to rush him. But I think at the end of the season, they were still kind of handling him with care. And even that last start, he only pitched 3 1/3 innings. They didn't let him go deep into the game, but they let him pitch just long enough that he could show a little bit of what he could do, which was very impressive, in that he struck out 7 batters in a row. He was dealing as best as he could. But I think with Eichhoff, what's going to happen is he's probably going to join Velasquez, Eflin, and Pivetta, if they're all still here at spring training. And I'd probably be the 4 of them competing for 2 spots. I think there's enough promise in what Eichhoff did for them, that they don't feel the need to try to go remove him from the 40-man roster or something like that, which would be a little extreme. But I think that he's going to still have to battle a little bit to show that he's healthy. And I think if he's healthy, he's going to edge out some of the younger guys in that starting rotation next year. Now, I do think they're going to have to get another starter. They're going to have to get a left-handed starter one way or another, in my estimation. You saw them just, when they beat the Boston Red Sox, it's because they deployed their left-handed relievers starting early in the game, and that's what took down the Boston Red Sox. You need that lefty. So I think they're going to try to get one. I don't know who it'll be. It could be a free agent. It could be a trade for someone like Danny Duffy or something like that. But I think Eichhoff impressed them enough that they're going to want to have him stick around. They're going to hope that he comes to spring training healthy. And if he shows that he is, I think he's got a real shot at one of those final two spots.
All right, Frank. Alfaro, Santana, Hernandez, whoever plays shortstop, Kingery, Crawford, Franco, Williams, Herrera, and Hoskins. Who's not there next year?
Well, I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say Hoskins will be there.
Is he going to be in left?
That's really hard to say. I think there's a real possibility he's at first base. Whether or not they've seen enough of Carlos Santana at third base to give him a shot. And look, I'll be honest. If you add a Bryce Harper to your outfield, right? I mean, you can live with Santana playing some third base. I mean, he made a couple really, really nice plays at third base. He's got the arm for it. He's got the glove for it. I think they might just suck it up and leave him there with the idea that they'll take him out after the seventh inning if they need a defensive replacement. I think he could stick around, but at the same time, I think Santana could be traded if they have the opportunity, because I think Hoskins is going to be at first base. But beyond that, I think it's going to be a matter of who else likes these players. I think they realize they can't keep all those players that you named. I think Alfaro is going to stick around. I'd like to see him paired with a veteran, with Ramos, if that's a possibility, if he continues to get better. I mean, he was still a little banged up even down the stretch, Wilson Ramos, but I think he would be a nice pair with Alfaro so he could develop. You mentioned Kingery. I think Kingery will be playing second base next year. I mean, they said they'll trade anybody but Nola and Hoskins, but I think they kind of want to keep Kingery, and I think they want him to play second base. But, if they can't find a good trade match for Hernandez, I mean, they'd be essentially selling a little low. I tend to think also that I think Odubel Herrera might be moving on as well. As I said on this airways, back when he signed that 6-year deal, I thought that that made him very tradable. And I think there's a lot of teams out there that would love to take the chance that Odubel Herrera is going to be the Odubel Herrera of April, and there's going to be some hitting coach out there who thinks that they can fix him, that's going to love to take on that contract, which is very reasonable still. So I could see him exiting. I could see Hernandez exiting. I think shortstop's going to be very tricky. J.P. Crawford, unfortunately, he didn't really get to show what he could do this year, and unfortunately, they're going to have to basically see what happens. And a lot could be whether or not they get Manny Machado. If they land Manny Machado, they might give him the first shot at shortstop. I don't know if I want Manny Machado and Carlos Santana on the left side of the infield as your starters. But a lot depends on who they get and what they can maneuver. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts this offseason, and it's going to be a very tricky puzzle piece to put together, which is one reason that this is such a crucial offseason for Matt Klentak.
We'll be covering it. Frank will be following it at 97.3 ESPN.com, at Frank Klose on Twitter. He, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. We'll be talking this offseason. Plenty, Frank. Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.